This movie will help you to start developing native and mobile desktop applications quickly using web technologies such as HTML, CSS, and JavaScript using Appcelerator's Titanium. We're going to take a look at starting an iPhone application, and for iPhone applications we're just going to be using JavaScript unless we're using web views, in which case we can use HTML and CSS. The advantage of Titanium over traditional development with Objective-C and the iPhone SDK is that we can write code very quickly using very familiar dot syntax that for those of you web developers and maybe even ActionScript 2 or 3 developers know. And you can start to really fly with your applications and not get bogged down with the nitty-gritty of Objective-C. So what you'll need for this movie is Titanium, and as well you'll need to have installed the iPhone SDK and a text editor. For my text editor, I'll be using Dreamweaver. Within Titanium Developer, you can create a new project by clicking the New Project icon at the top. You'll select a project type. We'll choose Mobile, and you'll give your project a name. Think very carefully. We'll call this Tutorial 1. Your app ID is typically a domain name in reverse order, with the last bit being your application name. So I'll choose org.rafaelhernandez.tutorial01. The directory is where on your hard drive you wish to store the project. So I'll choose the desktop. And then your company or personal URL. That's pretty self-explanatory. And then the Titanium SDK version. You can choose different SDKs. I'll choose the most recent one. My development platform is 10.5.8. There is a known bug as of the making of this video with running 1.1.2 SDK, so you'll want to look on the developer forums to apply a patch. But you can always choose SDK 1 and it will render just fine. Titanium will sniff out iPhone and Android SDKs, and actually there is a setting to point the application to the Android SDK. Since we're not going over Android right now, we'll just skip that. Now we'll choose Create Project. After your project is created, you're not prompted with any sort of file to open. So from here it can seem a little confusing because traditionally you would expect a file to open and you could start editing it. Titanium is more a compiling platform. It's not necessarily an editing platform. For that we're going to go into the project folder and actually look for the file that was created. But before we do that, you'll see that there's a projects pane here at the left, and your projects are listed, and here we see Tutorial 1. We could make changes to some of the initial information if we want. And as well, if we go to Test and Package and click the Run Emulator tab, choose iPhone and Launch, now our project will compile, and in a minute we'll get to see the iPhone SDK, or the iPhone simulator rather, with our project. The first launch of a project can sometimes take a while, so just be really patient. Okay, so the initial application that you're given is a template that's got a tab group of 2 tabs and a window with a nav bar at the top. We can close out and open it again. Here we see Tutorial 1 with the app badge. And you see there's a really quick start screen, and also we'll go over where you find that and how to edit it. What we'll do is take a look at how to edit the application badge. That's the small icon that's represented on the home screen of the iPhone. And as well we'll take a look at how to edit the splash screen, which is the first screen that appears. Now when you run it in the simulator it appears really quickly and then it disappears. You got to remember that you're running the application pretty much at the speed of your computer. When you actually run it on the device, it'll be there a little bit longer. But anyhow, so what we do is we find the project folder on the hard drive. I put mine on the desktop, and I'll double click Tutorial 1 and then navigate to the Resources folder and then the iPhone folder. And in this particular folder you'll find 2 PNG files, one called App Icon and one called Default with a capital D. So what I'll do is right click them and choose Open With, and I'll open them with Photoshop. Now in Photoshop, you see that you can very simply just replace the existing icon if you wanted, but you might want to write down the dimensions of the badge in case you're in a development environment and maybe you want to pass on that information to somebody else. So that the dimensions for the app badge are 57 by 57, and your DPI could be 72, it could be a little bit higher if you want it, and it's RGB. And then for your startup screen, the dimensions here are 320 by 480, and when you are done editing your files, you want to save them as PNGs, 24-bit, and you can include transparency, that's fine, and then you want to store them in this folder here that says iPhone. So I'll make a really quick application badge. Apologies if it doesn't look too good. The purpose is more to show you that it can be done. So I'll hide the existing one and I'll use some text. I've got some music notation fonts, so I'm going to go ahead and use those. To put a treble clef. Okay. And then I'll choose File and Save As and PNG. You could do Save for Web and Devices. This is just my preferred method. Make sure you're in the right folder and choose Save. Now, on default PNG, I'll hide their background and just insert the same. This is lacking again in character, but it's more to show you the process. Okay, and then change this to type that you can see. And then save as. Choose PNG, save, and then when we head to the iPhone folder here that has them, what we need to do is take the originals and delete them. If you're overly paranoid, you can move them to a temporary folder, and then we delete the suffix copy. Okay. Now, if I run this application again without recompiling it, there are no changes. So, now that I've changed the icons, I want to choose Launch again. Make sure that your project is highlighted. It'll recompile. And there you go. You can see it really quickly. Don't blink. And there's the application badge. So now, that's a pretty cool thing to do, to design your own badge and get your own brand on there. It can be really exciting. Especially when you run it on the device and you see it. But you've still got nothing until you can actually develop some views and put some data in your application, and that's what we'll go over next. We've edited the app badge and the splash screen. Now it's time to edit the application. Within the project folder, you'll navigate to the resources folder and then look for a file called app.js. Think of this file as being akin to an index.html file for a web page. This is your starting point, and we will create other JavaScript files later, but this file will remain our starting point. You don't want to rename it at all. You want to make sure it's named app.js, and we'll open it to take a look at its contents. Let's take a look at the application too. When we launch the application, we see that we're given a application that has two tabs at the bottom, and then the contents of the window change. And you can see that when I choose tab 2, the nav bar changes to tab 2, and there's a label here that says I am window 2 and then I am window 1. When you're designing your application, you do want to take into consideration that if you use this particular design, this is a tab group, that there is nothing right off the bat that compels a user to choose tab 1 from the start. That is, they could launch the application and immediately choose the tab 2. So you want to think about those things when you're designing. Anyhow, when we go back to app.js, we see that there are lots of methods here, and we can see some of the first glimpses of the API in action. For instance, at line 5, there's a variable tab group equals, and then we see the method titanium.ui.createTabGroup. So the way this is going to work to utilize the tab group is first you're going to create the group. Then we're going to create windows and tabs, and we're going to link them together, which we're going to take a look at in a moment. When you declare variables using the Titanium API, you want to make sure you type var before it. JavaScript is notoriously loose, and when you do web development, you can get away with a lot of murder, and you can still get away with some with Titanium, but it's good to treat it more like you're coding maybe in AS3 or C or C++, even though it's not that strict. So we see that this variable tab group is now an instance of here this create tab group. We'll go down and we see var win1 equals then titanium.ui.createWindow. And then after create window, there is an object that has title and a string and background color and a string. And so this method here, create window, is how we will create a window which will then hold content. And this is the crux of development on the iPhone in particular, is that you're creating what are called views, and the views have within them other views. So if you've done any AS3 development, it's akin to using a movie clip to house other movie clips. And even there's a similar sort of function to add child, but it's not actually called add child in Titanium. So there's win1 and tab1, and if you take a look at tab1, then the API says create tab. So this makes a lot of sense. What you're doing is you're creating a window and you're creating a tab, and then if you take a look at the argument for tab1, window win1, that means that when you're instantiating a tab, or creating a tab rather, the window property of that tab links it to a window. So when we create a new window, we'll see how this works. You can change the text. So let's say we want to change the title of tab 1 to, this is intro, and then the tab 1 title, that's the text that appears beneath the tab. Call that intro as well. This particular property icon is the icon that is represented in the tab. So that's this icon down here. And you can edit that in Photoshop. If you wanted to know where it was, well, it's just like web referencing in terms of your file references. It's in the same directory as app.js. So what we could do is go to the Finder, and you can see that there are two icon files here, these PNGs. And you could, if you wanted, edit them. But we won't do that right now. So back to app.js, there's win1, tab1, and then label1. And label1 says I am window 1. Going to the simulator, that is this text here in the middle. So looking at the simulator, win1 is this entire window here. Tab1 is this first tab, and label1 appears in the window. Now, the way we're going to actually make that happen is, if we take a look at line 29, we get the first bit that's really important. So win1, add label1. So this method here allows us to add content to win1, which is a window up here. So if we wanted to, we could make another label and add that to win1. So let's do that. Copy this, paste it. We'll call it label 1A. And now the text, I am another label in window 1. We'll change the font size, let's say to 12. Well, make it a little bit bigger. And this has a little bit of a sort of CSS style property scheme to it. So let's say top 40. So 40 pixels from the top, this will appear. And comma. Now, there are lots more arguments you can include, and you take a look at the API documentation. But as well, in another movie, we'll take a look at examining the kitchen sink application for that. Now, I'm not done. I have to actually add this label to the window. So, win1 add label 1a. I'll save it and go back to Titanium and relaunch it. I'll close out of the application. Don't close the iPhone simulator. Just close out of the application and then launch. So here you can see I am another label in label 1, and we're well on our way to actually putting in content. So from here you could define that pretty much if you wanted more content, you could change the existing labels, you can create new ones and then add them to the window, and as well you could create new tabs. To do this, we'll take all of label 2's information, copy it, and paste it, and then when we see a 2, we'll change it to a 3. It's a very quick and dirty shortcut. Okay, so we created a third window, and its title will be Window 3. A third tab, let's give it the title Window 3. We point it to Window 3, that's really important. And then we put a label in Window 3 called I am Window 3. Finally, we add the label to Window 3. We're still not done. We have to add the tab to the tab group. That's here at the bottom. So now tab group, add tab, tab 3. So we had to create the window, create the tab, link up the tab and the window, put some content in the window, show the content, and finally add the tab. Now if we save it and render it again, we'll see that there's new content. And there's Window 3, and there we have it. So this is just the beginning of how to get started with Titanium and start to fool around with little bits of functionality on the mobile platform. In the future, we'll take a look at specific types of views, remotely streaming data into the device or pulling from a particular model. It's like a database or an XML file. And as well, we'll take a look at actually getting this on a device, which will involve having a provisioning file and then later a distribution file.